Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our first cybersecurity webinar, Securing the Modern Enterprise. We've got half an hour, so Securing the Modern Enterprise. I'm not sure what we'll do with the other 25 minutes. It's such an easy topic. No, it's a very, very complex topic. I'm delighted to have joining me Spiros Papageorgiou from CrowdStrike and our very own Jed Schoen. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself, fellas?
Who's going to go first?
Yes, by all means.
Cool. Hello, everyone. It's Spiros. I've been working at CrowdStrike the last 4 years. I come from the network security background, so I'm quite familiar with the topic today. I've seen that from different roles, so really excited to be here today, and thank you for the invite, guys.
Thanks, Spiros. Good morning, everyone. So my name's Jed Schoen, as Ed's rightfully said. I've been here now for what's coming up to 4 years in the cybersecurity practice, and currently run the portfolio and the pre-sales function within our business.
Brilliant, thank you both. Delighted to have you with us. Securing the modern enterprise, it's something that isn't just an end organization problem, it's a partner problem, it's a technology problem, but most of all, I think probably an integration problem, which is why we've brought this audience together to have a bit of technology, a bit of partnership as well, and viewpoints across the piece as to what does it take to secure the modern enterprise. So let's get straight into it. So starting with you, Spiros, when we think about kind of modern threats, the current threat landscape, how do you see that need for coordination across the whole environment within an organization and their ecosystem as part of that?
So what we've seen so far at CrowdStrike and what we hear from customers, adversaries, they become more sophisticated these days. They try to find and leverage different ways and different paths. So if we're relying on a legacy architecture, that's not going to protect us, or it's not going to take us anywhere from cross-domain attacks. So if we are not able to coordinate the telemetry from other security domains, we're going to fall behind. We're not going to be fast to respond, because that will require a lot of manual operations if it's not automated and integrated in the platform, which can massively introduce delayed detections, ineffective containments from threats, and that's going to be chaotic from the security operations perspective.
Absolutely, absolutely. And within that, you mentioned different security domains. That's likely to include, potentially multiple vendors across the piece where we're trying to get that telemetry from. Collaboration's not something that's always been great between, but how do you see that kind of collaboration between the technology vendors in terms of that modernized defense, that modernized risk posture?
So in short, over the last 7 years, the traditional perimeter that everybody knew has changed dramatically. So we don't have the on-premise environment. We have something in the cloud, we have something on-prem. So we're looking for more complex architectures, while all that remote workforce is using SaaS applications at the same time. So you can imagine that collaboration is a key here in that complex architecture. And I think from my perspective, the value that can bring on the table for customers and users in general, that can guarantee a better level of visibility, more comprehensive visibility, I would say. And if we want to be a little bit more focused on the topic today for endpoints and our network security layer, that can correlate those detections and bring them together. We can be faster when we respond back, because we will be able to calculate the attack path, and we can implement dynamic or adaptive security policies, because the security posture can change any minute. So what we see in the endpoint level at CrowdStrike, we can leverage that information over an API call and say, hey, are you aware of that? And then Fortinet can take care of the necessary actions on the network level, because that's their expertise. And I think that can bring better collaboration, and it can massively improve operations. So and take away the hard work from the customer to troubleshoot and make that integration work, because it's been tested.
I mean, you referenced to there that to happy bedfellows from a technological integration point of view. Obviously, yourselves, CrowdStrike, a lot of telemetry around the endpoint, a lot of telemetry around things like identity and cloud. With one of your native partners, Fortinet, who traditionally are more network-based, ZTNA, but are also somewhat of a competitor in the endpoint and the SIEM space. So, where you've got these two, behemoths of the security technology world, what does a good partnership look like when it comes to that technological integration?
So as you mentioned, Fortinet is one of our key strategic partners. We support hundreds of integrations. Some integrations are not very mature, but we focused and we invested a lot of time for that integration. And to make it effective, our product teams, they work together. They're aligned. So our security strategy is aligned with their strategy. And when it comes down to the roadmap, that integration will keep going. It will get more mature. It will get better because the developers are working together to make sure that we get the right data and we're able to provide the right responses. So it's quite important because I've seen in the past integrations with other vendors, other platforms that they were not quite mature. And you can imagine how many resources you will need from the customer perspective, from the vendor perspective, to jump on the call and say, why that API call is not working. So it was like 3 vendors on the call. They haven't tested before the integration. That took like 6 months to get it up to speed. And that's not good. So I think when you take full ownership and you get at the bottom of that, you go back to the customer and say, right, follow these instructions. That's an API-based integration. You reserve and you save them a lot of time. And they experience the platform and they focus on their security strategy rather than trying to boil the ocean and reinvent the wheel. So I think that's the magic when you provide a tested and evaluated integration to the end user. They go straight to the point and they do what it matters more for them, which is the operations.
Brilliant. Thank you, Spiros. And kind of bringing that from, taking from the technology vendor integration point of view, making sure things work together to kind of almost bring it into the real world of how that matters in a customer environment and the help needed across that. Turning to you, Jed, thinking, what's happening in the modern customer environment and how do we bring this to life of this collaboration between technology partners and of course the end customer?
From an end customer's point of view, the world has never been so plentiful of choice, but harder to make those choices. We have the fortunate pleasure of working with many customers across all sectors, and there is the ever-present problem of bigger problems and not enough budget. Yeah, so one of the key parts of working with CrowdStrike and Fortinet and a couple of our other key strategic vendors to bring our solutions together is ensuring that the customer can achieve their vision with their technology roadmap, not just for today, but something that will last, within the life cycle that they planned. So, if you take the adage of best of breed today is easy to find, but what you can't predict what best of breed of tomorrow is going to be and how they're going to work together, or if they will work together at all. And ultimately, from the security posture, that then is where the gaps start to form. Yeah, and Spiros, you're obviously talking around the ever increasing kind of flexibility of the adversaries. They're not finding the gaps necessarily in where people have made misconfiguration. Obviously they still exist, but they're really finding the gaps in coverage, and working with a partner such as CrowdStrike, who has opened up their ecosystem in essence and been open to work with other people in that collaborative way, where each of the portfolios do complement, but there is overlap, allows someone like Telefónica Tech, like our good selves, to really work with those customers to make sure that they are future proofing, but also been able to build a resilience for their business, not just for their security needs of today.
Awesome, Jed. So thinking of that almost like, a journey of where, an organization is today versus where potentially we can get them to tomorrow through this kind of partnership. Can you just talk us through kind of a typical use case that we've gone through at TT of where, how an organization's looked in terms of their defensive posture, their risk posture, through how this journey through technology, through process, through partner integration, has actually taken them to a different place?
Yeah, so there's one example we can talk through. So we've got a retail organisation which has worked with us for many years on many different levels, and obviously Telefónica Tech has got the fortunate position of being able to support people across all of their tech stack, whether it be the networking, the cloud, the security, and even the data platforms. So this particular customer is a long-standing kind of partner of ours, and we're a partner of theirs. But one of the words that we completely overuse is in our world is maturity. We always talk about maturing your cyber posture and understanding. Well, this customer really epitomized that, because they started off in a position of, you would class as low maturity, but really was right for them at the time of where they were on their journey. And obviously, as their business has grown, as their posture has increased, because they're, as you rightfully said, Spiros, you're no longer working to a defined kind of network, kind of infrastructure. Everything's distributed. Obviously, all of their risks and as such, their vision had to change rapidly. So they've grown up really quick, right? And as such, then they needed to move into something much more distributed, something, moving to SD-WAN as an example, to allow them to have more flexibility of connectivity, wanting to move into ZCNA to allow them ease of use within their own supplier base, and obviously their own contractor and direct employee kind of connectivity. And where they were on a security journey was always that just-in-time model. It was, they had a SOC, they had some capabilities, but it was just enough. It was never really seeing where it would go for the future. And the organisation deemed it necessary to look at a transformative program. Yeah, they knew they were on a rapid trajectory of growth. They knew that they needed to look at tomorrow as their current state rather than looking at today. And they knew that they were making fundamental changes in their connectivity and their network architecture. So that meant that we want to support them. We looked at not how do we solve each problem individually, but how do we solve them holistically. So, the partnership with Fortinet to allow them to provide direct connectivity, be able to bring in SD-WAN through our FlexWAN service, be able to bring in, things like the start of Zero Trust as an example, the way we can configure and architect that, then meant we needed to have something in the security perspective that didn't just do the job, but would work as quickly and as seamlessly as we could with the fabric that we were building, to allow us to continue to do the job, but to do it not just for tomorrow, but as quick and as effective as we could today. Because obviously their entire posture had changed overnight, essentially. For that, there was only one simple choice. And that was obviously the integrations of the way CrowdStrike was working and the overall platform and what posture that brought us. So, with the ability to pick and choose the right modules from the CrowdStrike platform and the integrations into Fortinet and a couple of the other vendors that we were working with, we were able to build that mesh of security whereby we, in our operations center, can see and use the automations to react as quick and as effectively as humanly possible, and to immediately give them a massive jump on their maturity scale. So they've seen, at the moment, they've seen a vast improvement, but they now will see the tail of that as not just a tail, but they will see that leading their strategy into the next 5 years as to where they can take their business.
Awesome, that's brilliant. And just building on kind of those two vendors, because just in that explanation there, you can see that actually they're not being utilized in this sense as a point solution, which is historically what a lot of kind of organizations have done, which is I need a solution for a particular thing, be it SD-WAN, I need another one for a web gateway, I need something for endpoint, I need something for cloud, I need something for my SIEM products. Both of these vendors, and they are a happy marriage, which is absolutely awesome, makes our life a hell of a lot easier and the customers. But they both kind of have a platformization play. So is it part of the reason for bringing those together in this customer instance? Is that so that they can grow with the customer through their continual journey, whether it's into identity, into cloud, that full ZTNA journey? Is that what led down the path with these particular vendors?
There was 2 points really. One was you mentioned the word platformization, and the vendors are going on that format of moving towards that single screen management, right? But ultimately, what working with those two in particular allows you is to move as close to a single screen management because of the API connectivities and the integrations that they've built. So you no longer have to kind of keep constantly swivel seating in an operational perspective. So that allows them to have freedom to grow, and the fact that then you've got this myriad of modules that you can grow into from CrowdStrike, and a myriad of modules from Fortinet that are all working together, has allowed us to be able to look at the business problems and the business opportunities, and look at how you architect to them, rather than looking at the point solution challenges that we always face. You're essentially shifted left in the whole mindset. So you're not looking at, okay, we know we need an endpoint solution. It's like, what endpoint solution can we use that will enable us to achieve our business goals? And it's a very different construct and conversation. The last part that made the decision so much easier was, their first iteration where they was very much kind of fire and forget. It was outsourced, for want of a better way of putting it. As they grew and their complexity grew, they needed to be more integrated themselves. They needed to have visibility. They needed to be able to access these platforms. They needed to be able to understand the data behind it, not just what the information that was coming out of it was. So the ability to act in a shared service model, in essence, where we both can see the screens, we both can interface with the data, and we both can work on the challenges, as a partnership, has meant it's completely changed their reactive posture status, and meant that they ultimately are dealing with things as they come up rather than after they've come up. So those two things were the key part: future proofing essentially, and ultimately the ability to reduce the mean time to response together.
Awesome. That's brilliant, Jed. Thank you. And it kind of feeds into what Spiros was talking earlier, in a sense that you'll never go single vendor, across the piece. There will always be, even just in the purest security aspect, there will always be another vendor at least. It might be, endpoint versus firewalls versus SIEM versus cloud, whatever it happens to be. So that coming together and meshing, as you described it, which I think was perfect, is absolutely vital. Jed, just building on that, why TT? Why Telefónica? What was kind of the prime reason that they came to us?
I think what makes us different and why customers come to us is we have great relationships with our vendors, clearly, right? But we make the choices for the customer. Yeah, so we put the customer ultimately first, right? We do have choices within our portfolio, but each of those choices power our services and capabilities. So, our kind of branding around our security services portfolio, as is well documented, is under the banner of Next Defense. So it's Next Defense powered by CrowdStrike, powered by Fortinet, powered by the others, which allows us to ensure that we take accountability with that customer, and to make sure that customer sees us as the single point of contact and the single point of responsibility. We're bringing all those things in as pillars underneath our capability and make that available to the customer, whether it be globally or locally. So it's that accountability ultimately.
And I think one of the things that really resonated with me, certainly from my former role of being a customer of the likes of TT and CrowdStrike, was when you said earlier that actually both the customer and Telefónica were seeing the same data. There's no kind of us or them. There's no kind of mirrors in between the two. It's a complete openness and transparency. If we're going to make good decisions, and it is a we, then we need to see the collective data and interpret it from that kind of threat landscape, but business context point of view. And that's where that kind of trusted partnership really comes together.
Yeah, we don't see ourselves upstream or downstream of the customer. We see ourselves on equal footing. And that means that any decisions that they make will have an impact on us and vice versa. So we have to make them together.
Awesome, thank you. And just coming back to you, Spiros, obviously you work for a particular vendor. You've got a vast portfolio that appears to grow by the day. Whether that's through acquisitions or your dev teams. The continual evolution of the Falcon platform. How much more are you seeing, or less? Or what are you seeing in terms of that customer need to say, I want best in breed technology, but I've got to have this integration side of things, with other technologies? You see more of a drive towards that integration being a prime driver when they're looking at different products, different modules?
So I will. That's a really good question. I've seen situations, because I come from the vendor land. I used to work for another vendor, and when you say the customer you have to buy everything from one security provider, you just turn everything upside down, because you don't leave them a chance to think of the best of breed that you said. So one of the reasons that I decided to move at CrowdStrike is because they invested many years to build a security platform that will allow people and customers to take decisions for the best of breed. At the moment, we have 400 plus integrations, if I still keep up with that, because it keeps growing. So I think it's really important to make sure that you can accommodate other systems, collaborate, and make sure you allow the customer to decide the best solution for the security domain they're working on, to bring that at the easiest and the smoothest way on board and run their operations. And we see a lot of demand. That's why we're keep investing. And probably you've seen acquisitions. We're trying to make sure that our platform approach will be able to handle more operations with a multi-vendor environment. This is our vision, to make sure we can collaborate with multiple vendors.
That's awesome. And as part of that, even right from the start, we mentioned that in certain aspects, kind of, focus on Fortinet and CrowdStrike, there is an overlap, and at some point you go from complementary to competitor, and actually that integration with competitors for their complementary product set is absolutely vital for that customer outcome, isn't it?
It is. Of course, there are areas that we overlap around the NGC perspective, but I'm like, you know what? You have to pull your sleeves on, guys, and do some serious work here and support our customers, because our aim is to support customers. Competition is important as well, but at the end of the day, we need to keep our customers happy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And ultimately, it's on all of us to make sure we drive the right customer outcomes. That way we end up with happy customers, and hopefully we do not just more business with them, but we get closer into better partnerships across the board. Just kind of turning around, Jed, so when you look at kind of the use case that we had there of an organization that's in a particular state of maturity, and they've got future plans, what about an organization that's kind of in that space but isn't quite sure where to go next? How can TT help them understand kind of what the art of the possible is?
I think the key word that I used before is we need to help them develop the vision. Yeah, so to kind of get out of the weeds of dealing with putting the fires out on a daily basis, and moving towards what all strategic decisions they can make, which will put the fires out automatically. So kind of working with them to understand twofold, really. The first thing is where do they really need to be, and almost all of our conversations are not technology conversations anymore. They are ultimately our outcome and business solution conversations. So we often look at where ultimately does the organization need to go, and then how can security and infrastructure and IT support that trajectory, rather than in order to be the building blocks towards it, rather than how do you put that in after they've made a decision about where they want to go and how do you facilitate it. So that vision, whether it be through understanding where they want to be towards an assertion model, or whether they want to be towards kind of a maturity against a framework, or whether they currently are making the most of their own capabilities, is the first step. The other thing then is about maximizing what they already have and making sure that they understand the true capabilities that's already in place. And this is where CrowdStrike is fantastic, because CrowdStrike allows themselves, with the collaboration, to kind of bolster and support an organization's already in place ecosystem. Yeah, very rarely do we have conversations around ripping and replacing. Yeah, cost of change is a vast problem in all organizations. So it may not be in the traditional sense of a CrowdStrike equals EDR, so that's obviously always in the thing. with all those other modules, all those other capabilities, they can complement what's already in with an existing organization. And then from there, we can really understand what assets they have and how we can close them gaps. So, understanding where they want to get to and having a clear vision of that to support the business outcomes, understanding what they have and how you can use the right partners and the right technologies and services to close them gaps to enforce that. And then, there's a couple of tools to do that, right? We've obviously got, things like our own cyber maturity assessments, which allows us to build out that customer's roadmap towards driving that vision. And then we've got obviously our technology assessments, which allow us to look at what capabilities are in present today, what the posture management of them is, and being able to then feed into that vision from a technological perspective to understand what changes need to be made, or where they need to double down on what they've already got. Yeah, but almost always our conversations is sweat first, make sure that you're maximizing everything, and then complement in order to get to your vision. Rip and replace is not the standard conversation in any way, shape, or form.
As you say, cost of change and the potential impact on risk posture as you navigate through that transition can be a massive. It can be actually something that just puts people off, and they just go, do you know what? It's easier to renew. Just wondering if that, of those assessments kind of thing. Obviously, Spiros, CrowdStrike offers a number of assessments that, Telefonica, we're, fortunate enough to be well versed to be able to run those. Can you just give us a flavour of some of those kind of assessments and what they run, and then how TT kind of helps with that process?
So, as part of today's conversation about the integration with Fortinet, it's all great, but what I say to other partners that I'm working with when they're trying to develop their services and support their customers, I think the best approach on this, before we start doing anything with any integration, is to have a consultative approach. And as Gerard mentioned, we need to start building the implementation plan from scratch. Run the assessment, whatever that is, even if it's led from Telefonica, or if you want to leverage our platform, we have the tool that is provided to you. It's a multi-tenant architecture, and you can run customer engagements in different security domains. So if you're working on an identity threat detection and response project, we can run the assessment for example, we can look at the key insights, what happens on-prem, what happens on your cloud-based identities, whatever they are, understand the security posture. And based on that, we can build a baseline to understand what is normal, what is suspicious, and start working gradually on the prevention policies and all that. But it's a journey. We need to understand where every customer is in their cybersecurity journey. If there are elements that are missing, like fundamental elements like network security, SaaS security that we do as well, because we see a lot of SaaS exploitation in the wild, and that goes together with identity, because you need credentials to log into these applications. So we can unpack a lot of different proactive assessments, but again, that will become the outcome of a conversation for what is relevant for every customer. Once we know what are the pain points and the use cases that we're about to solve, we can come back, schedule these assessments, discuss the findings, and start building that plan together with our partner and our customers. I think that's the best approach before we waste anyone's time, because these projects, they're going to happen in a production environment that will require to work outside the business hours sometimes. You don't want a crazy rollout with frustrated users. So it's a kind of a journey, our approach, and it's a consultative approach. I think that's the best way.
Brilliant. And one of those things, that consultative approach of working that true partnership where, you take the best in class technology, you take kind of the customer trusted advisor and consultancy that's trying to help the customer achieve the outcomes, make the right decisions. And, especially from a Telefonica point of view, helping them kind of go through, especially, when you've got, say, a CrowdStrike or a Fortinet, where there's multiple components, multiple modules, helping them understand how do I start to explore these modules to then get into exploiting them, to get the best use out of them. It's a tale as old as time of people kind of over purchasing and underusing. And, a big part of what we do is helping them through that process to actually make sure actually you're getting the fullest value. We can run, the assessment and understand where they are today. And to get there, there's a process that goes alongside the technology. Gentlemen, it's been absolutely brilliant. Your insight's been fabulous from that technological point of view, from that partnership point of view, bringing it to life as well around, what is a very, very complex subject, but actually you have to start somewhere, and that's in that understanding, that assessment, that conversation, that vision, that strategy, to then determine what are the right technology choices, the integrations, and how we bring it all together to maximize any use of expenditure. Jed, Spiros, thank you. For everyone listening, if there's of interest, please get in touch. We'd be delighted to talk to you and see where your vision goes.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.